Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. My name is Tori with Tori's Crochet Creations, and today I'm going to be doing a video like everything I wish I knew, everything that I do know, and I'm going to be sharing it with you guys. And yeah, let's get started. Cut. Okay, so a few things to preference before I immediately jump into this video. I am getting over being sick, so if there is a lot of cuts, it's probably because I'm coughing up a storm and I don't want you guys to have to hear that. Also, I am testing the mics in my AirPods because I cannot find my mics anywhere. So I would greatly appreciate if I got some feedback on how this mic is comparatively to my last two videos. So now that we got that out of the way, you have decided that you wanted to crochet, but you know nothing about it, absolutely nothing, maybe other than you only have one hook rather than two, like knitting, and you have decided that you want to learn this form of fiber art. So the basic needs for crocheting is number one, a crochet hook. Now, I would highly recommend a ergonomic crochet hook rather than just like a straight metal one or plastic one or whatever the case may be. Get something that's ergonomic, because after a while, once you actually decide or realize that this is going to start to consume your life, a metal one just is not going to cut it at all. You're going to have a lot of hand and wrist pain. So I would definitely recommend an ergonomic one. That way you can crochet longer amounts of time without any wrist pain. The next thing that you're going to need is scissors. Now, I prefer to just use some regular old scissors. Nothing too fancy. However, if you were to get a kit, you're more than likely going to see one of these bad boys. They do the job. They do the exact same thing. Pretty much lastly, that's like bare minimum necessity that you're going to need is yarn. I would definitely recommend starting with acrylic. I think that the stretch that it gives definitely allows you to like feel out your tension a bit more. It is a lot smoother to work with, and also it is a lot cheaper than perhaps cotton yarn, which we will get into the differences later of the two, but I would start with acrylic. That was definitely what I would recommend. I would also start with around a weight 3 or 4. 4 is like the most standard like yarn weight, and again we're going to get into yarn weight later. The next thing I have is not technically a requirement, however I'm going to highly suggest that you get stitch markers. Stitch markers are going to allow you to mark however many stitches that you need. I know that some crocheters, when they're working in large amounts of like stitches, like high numbers, they will use this kind of as like a placeholder, like every 10 stitches or every 20, things like that. It is going to be extremely helpful to know where you ended a round and or started a round. I tend to put my stitch markers in the last stitch of the round, but that's really up to your preference. And a little slight self promo here, I do sell stitch markers on my Etsy. Right now I currently have gummy bear stitch markers and also boba stitch markers, but those are put away currently. So, and these do have a lobster claw clasp. I am looking into other types of clasps because I know that not everybody can finagle a lobster claw clasp the easiest, but if you are interested, it is going to be in my Etsy. Well, they already are in my Etsy. So if you're interested, definitely go check that out. I would greatly appreciate it. The absolute last thing I'm going to recommend. Now, this is at any point definitely optional if you do decide to get one. However, I would recommend a yarn winder. If you're anything like me, I cannot figure out how to make like the balls of yarn without it. So if you do know how to do that, it's totally optional if you do not get one, but I do think that it is a very helpful tool. Now for this section of the video, I do have some basic knowledge, kind of like just tidbits. So I'm gonna start off with, there are multiple ways on how to hold your crochet hook. There is, like how I was doing before, the pencil. So you would just kind of put it like this. It's basically like over all of your fingers, and you would be working kind of like that. I have the knife grip. That's just what I learned. It's what comes natural to me. I cannot for the life of me figure out how to crochet. I have tried so many times how to figure out how to crochet with the pencil grip, but those are the two ways to kind of like hold your crochet hook. So whatever fits or whatever feels more comfortable for you, that is the terminology. I'm not gonna lie, it took me forever to realize or learn that they had names on how to hold your crochet hook. So the next thing that I want to talk about is tension. There are multiple different ways on how to hold your yarn and create different types of tension, and tension is basically just how much slack you allow for your working yarn to have. I tend to have like a medium to a tighter tension, but as many things are in crochet, it's really just like stylistic and whatever works best for you. So I know that some people will wrap the yarn around their pinky and then crochet from there. However, I feel like for me personally, it is a little too tight. So I don't like to hold my yarn like that. Some people will kind of just like put it in between their pinky and their ring finger and then over their pointer finger and crochet like that. However, I tend to like to put it actually over my pinky and then underneath both my ring finger and my middle finger, and then have it over my pointer finger. For me personally, it gives like the exact tension that I like to have. I feel like it's a lot easier to control. The next thing I want to talk about is how does hook size change your tension. So there are various amounts of hook sizes. I normally see like 4.5s all the way up to 5.5s being like the most recommended for yarns. In particular with Big Twist, it is a weight 4 and they recommend a 5mm hook. The recommended hook size is at that. It is a recommendation on how your yarn is going to work. It's kind of gonna give you somewhere in the middle of, it's not too tight but it's also not too loose. Now when you are first starting off, I would definitely recommend buying a hook that corresponds with whatever yarn you are going to purchase. I would not recommend straying too far from that. Like, I definitely would not go with a 3.5mm or a 3.75mm hook when you are working with this yarn for the first time. Now, as you continue to go along, obviously you can change that to whatever you seem would be fit. So now I'm going to get into a little bit of crochet lingo. Now I am going to warn everyone, there are different types of terms. Like there's UK terms, there is US terms. I use US terms. I don't really know UK terms, so I'm not going to get too much into that. However, it does make a difference when you are crocheting if you are reading in UK terms or US terms. I'm sure there's more terms out there other than UK and US, but those are the two that come to my mind. So a skein, it's just kind of like a ball of yarn. It's what is packaged. This is called a cake. So skein, cake, skein, cake. And the next thing I want to talk about is, what is a whip? What does WIP mean? Because I was talking to my boyfriend one time and I was talking about my whips, and he had literally no idea what I was talking about. So a whip just stands for a work in progress. You may also see, like, sometimes people put an S at the end, just means that there's multiple. There is the slip stitch, the chain, the single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet, there is the treble crochet, and those are kind of like the basic stitches. I don't really know if the magic circle or magic ring really classifies as a stitch, but I am going to be mentioning it here. Now, this next term took me an embarrassing long time to learn what it was, and it's frogging. What does it mean to frog your work? Basically it means to just undo it, to unravel your work. So another interesting note about crochet is it's basically all loops. There's hardly any knots unless you are like fastening off. There's hardly any knots whatsoever. So you can literally just pull the whole thing out. For example, this is going to hurt my soul a little bit, but for the demonstration of the video, this is all one part. There is no knots in this, so frogging would be to unravel it. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, it definitely took me way too long to learn what that term meant. I was like, why are we talking about frogs? What does that have to do with crochet? I thought this was about yarn and hooks, and now we are adding frogs into the mix. I was so confused. So yeah, that is what frogging is. So now I kind of want to talk about the difference of a row versus a round. So a row kind of has like a visual start and stop point. You would make, like, let's say if you're making a scarf, you would make your slip stitch, do your chain for however wide you want it to be, and then you are going to work back into the chain. And once you get done with that, let's say you're doing single crochets, you would chain and then flip your work and go all the way back down, chain, flip your work, and go all the way back down. That's what a row is. Now a round, when I was thinking about it, it's kind of like a circular type of movement. Now, if you were going to be making like amigurumi, which is plushies, then you would be working in rounds, and it's kind of just like a continuous like spiral, I guess. And granny squares are also worked in rounds, because you're not flipping your work. Basically, If it's a row, you're going to be flipping your work. If it's a round, you are not going to be flipping your work. So now I want to talk about the difference between acrylic yarn and cotton yarn. There are quite a few differences, and I definitely did not know them a good couple months ago. Actually, I did a little bit of research for this video, and I learned even more about cotton versus acrylic, and I'm just primarily going to be talking about these two yarns in particular because I feel like they are the most used, especially like in the beginning of crocheting. They're definitely more compared than other yarns. And if you are interested in doing kind of like a deeper dive in different fibers, let me know. I can make a video about that as well. We're going to have a acrylic side versus a cotton side on the screen. To start off with, cotton is definitely way more expensive than acrylic, so for that reason I feel like it's not ideal for beginners, especially if you don't want to like just dive into a new hobby and then spend buttloads of money on it and then you realize you actually don't love it as much as you thought you would. The next thing is acrylic allows more stretch than cotton does, and I feel like when you're beginning that stretch, it can be helpful when you're trying to figure out that tension because it allows you to kind of navigate it a little bit better rather than cotton, which it just kind of keep as is. Like, it's not going to be as giving as acrylic would be. The next thing is acrylic is a synthetic fiber rather than a natural fiber, and it can be great for people who have allergies to natural fibers. And I will say I tend to use acrylic for my wearables. However, cotton can be softer like as it gets worn more and more and washed more and more, it does become softer as it ages. Not that acrylic isn't soft, it just, I don't know, I feel like that kind of depends on how you like your shirts to feel, your sensory, and all of that in between. I don't really mind the acrylic, and for someone who has like a lot of like sensory issues, acrylic isn't all that bad. And the last thing is cotton can be more difficult to work with as it's not really going to stick to your hook very well. Your hook may slide out a lot as you are working with it, so that can definitely be frustrating. However, acrylic does tend to split. The next thing is kind of what are they ideal for? I feel like cotton is more ideal for things like washcloths or scrubbies or pot holders, things that you would more or less find in like a kitchen because it does have a higher quality to it. It's not going to melt as acrylic would. Anything over 500 degrees Fahrenheit and 260 degrees Celsius, acrylic is going to melt. Acrylic is a type of plastic, but with that being said, it should be safe to wash and dry, and you're not really going to see any sort of shrinkage as you may with cotton. The next thing I want to talk about is yarn weight. Now, I've mentioned it multiple times in this video already, however, I really haven't talked about it at all at the same time, so I definitely want to dive a little bit deeper into this because it can be misleading, because it has nothing to do with how much the yarn actually weighs. However, it has everything to do with how much or how thick the yarn is. So according to the CYC, Yarn weight is measured by how many times it can be wrapped around a 1-inch section of a ruler. The Craft Yarn Council has a standard yarn weight system that uses numbers 0 through 7, with thinner yarns having smaller numbers. So, what does that 0 through 7 really mean? What does it look like? I'm going to add a little picture here of what I found. It is from the Craft Yarn Council. Next to me here, I have a few different examples of yarn weights. I don't have a 0 or a 7. However, I next to me have a 1, 3, 4, and 6. So to start off with the number 1, this is a very, very thin yarn, as you can see. On here it says that it is sock yarn, so you can obviously make some socks with these. I have not dabbled in socks. I don't know if I'm going to, but never say never, because there are so many things that I have said that I would never make, and here I am making them. So the next weight is a weight 3. It is very similar to a weight 4, which I do have both. The weight 3 is what is considered a DK yarn, and I will get more into that in a couple of minutes. I would recommend starting with either a 3 or a 4 weight yarn. They are both very similar in size. Obviously the 3 is going to be a little bit smaller. I could do a little comparison here. Let me try to pull it up from where I split the yarn. But as you can see, the weight 3 here is a little thinner than the weight 4. I do tend to, I like weight 3. I started making a hexicardi with the same brand. This is the Lion brand, in the shade Groot. Not this one. This is Ocean something. I forgot the exact name. But I started making a cardigan with the shade Groot, and I think that it's coming out beautifully. You're obviously going to have a few more rounds in order to get it to the size that you like. I do think it gives a very clean look. And then next I have a weight 6, and I feel like it's quite obvious that this is a lot thicker than the other ones. This is like a blanket yarn. I tend to use it for my amigurumi. I do have a little bit of like a little bit of information on each of the weights listed on the AI overview of Google. So the lace weight is the thinnest yarn. A super fine is like a fingering weight. A worsted is a bit thicker than a DK, and remember, a DK is like this. So the weight 4 would be more of like a worsted weight, and the weight 3 is a DK weight. And Aran, we have learned from the last video that I am not great at pronouncing words, so I'm gonna go with Aran because there's only one A in the beginning. Is more than twice as thick as a DK. A bulky is a thick yarn, and then a super bulky is a super thick yarn. So yeah, we're going to move on to the next section. So I kind of wanted to wrap this up talking a little bit about crochet kits, and not the like starting like material type, but like actual kits. Like, it comes with instruction on how to make a very specific project. I think that they can be wonderful once you have the basics down. I feel like reading a pattern as a very beginner can be very confusing I feel like reading a pattern can be very difficult as a beginner, especially if you're not completely familiar with all of the abbreviations and the crochet lingo. So I feel like following a free pattern on like YouTube or maybe Instagram, I feel like that would be a lot better as a beginner, because then you also get that visual. I am a visual learner, so there may be a little bit of a bias, but I do believe that it would help tremendously, because I know when I was crocheting my first ever project, it was a gnome. I had not crocheted anything in my life other than a very, 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 very long chain, and kind of working back with some single crochets when I was 8. For reference, I'm about to turn 20 in a couple of months, and I just started at the end of last year. So I do think that following a few patterns on YouTube would definitely be way more beneficial, rather than just having a written pattern in front of you. Now, if the crochet kit does come with like a visual, like you could scan a QR code and it does have some videos, I think that could be great. But I do, because I've seen like a lot of advertisements of like, oh, if you're an absolute beginner, buy our kit. And just from personal experience with some of those like creators and brands, it does tend to be a little bit misleading. I don't think that they are exactly entirely like first time ever picking up a crochet hook and yarn, let's whip out this project. Now, on the contrary to the other type of crochet kit, like the starting that comes with a bunch of hooks and maybe a bit of yarn, I think that those are absolutely amazing when you're just starting out. It kind of gives you a little bit of everything, gives you stitch markers and like different types too. Most of them come with like ergonomic hooks, which is great. It comes with little skeins of yarn, so I think that they can be absolutely amazing. I will link some down in the description below of some various prices depending on what is in your price range. So yeah. So what should you start with? I get asked this question constantly. What do I recommend people start with if they are beginning to crochet? And I honestly believe that it depends on your like attention span and how easily you are deterred from repeating the same thing over and over and over and over again. So before I even started crocheting, I came across Elise Meyer's little TikTok, maybe it was a YouTube short, talking about if you're going to start to crochet, then start with plushies rather than granny squares. And so I listened to her. She was like, if you have ADHD, start with plushies, because you're not gonna want to have to make the same square 107 times for a blanket. And I've just never had a good attention span, honestly. So I took her advice and I started with plushies. I think that starting with plushies can be great because there is a lot of repetition. It's basically all made out of single crochets. You learn how to increase and decrease and sew on certain parts, and you would with granny squares as well, like if you're making a project out of them. But I think that sewing is an amazing skill to learn. It is kind of dreaded overall in the crochet community, along with weaving in your ends, but both of them are honestly game changers. So I believe that starting with plushies, again, I think it gives great practice with single crochets, and you really get to master that skill. You get to master the skill of increasing and decreasing, as well as sewing on if the pattern requires it. Now, if you start with granny squares, You also get a lot of benefits of learning a plethora of different types of stitches. If you are making a granny square project, you really do get to repeat those stitches and really master them down. Like, you are more than likely going to master the double crochet, the half double crochet, they're also single crochet, and yeah, they both do start with the magic circle, which is also another dreaded thing in the community. I do have a video on my TikTok with all of the basic stitches. However, I am so willing to make a longer form video here on YouTube. So if you're interested in that, I do believe that that's going to be my next video coming out. So if you are interested in that, definitely let me know in the comments below. So yeah, that's kind of what I would have to say. If you don't mind making the same square over and over and over again, then definitely start with granny squares. You're going to learn a plethora of stitches. However, if you kind of just need like that immediate like serotonin boost, then I would definitely start with plushies. With all that being said, I hope that you found today's video helpful. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. If you think that I missed anything, also please list it down in the comments below. I will be reading through them. If I can't answer it in a comment, I will be making a future video on it. So please let me know what you guys think. If you guys like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that little notification bell. That way you're notified every single time that I post. Thank you guys so incredibly much for spending part of your day with me. I appreciate it. And lots of love to you all. I hope that if you are starting crocheting for the very first time, I hope that you genuinely fall in love with it as I have and so many other fiber artists have. It is honestly such a amazing craft. And if you do start crocheting, let me know what you start working on. Anyways, I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye. I figured I'd restart. And it's basically just how much the huh? Oh my god, Tori. What the heck that even meant? There we go.